Free agency is one of the best parts of the NBA season, with random blockbuster deals, Woj and Shams bombs, and superstars moving to different cities. After everything was seemingly done last offseason, one last deal had to be made. Cat became a Knick, and Randle and Donte were shipped to Minnesota, and both teams looked to get over their playoff hump. The Knicks were currently looking for another offensive option that could consistently space the floor and could operate well next to Jalen Brunson, who is a very ball-dominant guard. As for the Wolves, they were looking for another creator to help when Ant was seeing a lot of tough coverage, and with a guy like Gobert on the court, they needed as much offensive creation and playmaking as they could get. I'm sorry, Rudy. And with the added piece of Donte DiVincenzo, they found another guy who could stroke it from behind the arc at a high clip. After one season of the trade, we've picked up on a lot of things, such as the Knicks struggling with Cat's ability to be versatile defensively, especially getting picked apart by Indiana, as well as Julius Randle not being able to handle the ball or work enough to get open looks against a suffocating Thunder defense. But compared to expectations, was the trade an equal win-win for both teams, or is there something deeper than the surface that tells us a lot about the two squads going forward? Hello everyone, I'm Mason, and the Karl-Anthony Towns Julius Randle trade, looking back, is one of the most eye-opening trades for both teams involved, and they can kind of see what they need to do for their future, as they could see exactly where this trade moved them going forward. Make sure to drop a like and subscribe if you have not already. I'll give you like 3 seconds. Okay, thank you. You better have done it. In order to really understand a trade, we need to see the motives behind it. What kind of brought them to this point? As for the Knicks, falling out in the Eastern Conference semifinals to the Indiana Pacers was kind of a eye-opening moment, especially with the injuries they were facing. Their depth was kind of a joke. They also saw what the Boston Celtics were doing, having two very great wing players that were good on both sides of the ball, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. The Knicks tried to match that, as they would also pick up Mikal Bridges in this offseason. Putting him alongside OG Anunoby allowed for two guys that are very versatile on the defensive side to make up for having Jalen Brunson on the court. But as for picking up the big purr, they really looked to find a guy that could play well off of Brunson, and especially if Brunson has the ball in his hands a lot, he's a guy that can still facilitate very well for his teammates, and him and Cat running a pick and pop, as we saw throughout the season, was everything that we were hoping for. Now, the Wolves were kind of in a similar situation, going out sad in the conference finals against the Dallas Mavericks. They really had no way to slow down either Luka or Kyrie in this series, and while having Karl-Anthony Towns next to Rudy Gobert actually ended up working pretty well, as they kind of figured out how to run Cat outside and have him not get in the way, clogging the paint of Rudy Gobert, which they had seen to be a problem in the previous season. Now, I do believe part of the reason that they got rid of Cat to get Randle, but also were able to grab Donte DiVincenzo in the deal, being another guy that could come in and provide a little spark off the bench, or even start if needed to, coming off of his best shooting season of his entire career in New York. But funny enough, it kind of looked like both teams had lost this trade throughout the first couple months of the season. We could see that Minnesota would start off in play-in territory. The first 34 games of the season, they were 17-17, and they would also face probably the worst thing, being team chemistry issues, as there were several times where Julius Randle and Rudy Gobert would not get along. There was lots of immaturity and fighting in the locker room, but eventually they were able to tough it out, finishing 6th in the Western Conference. Now, on the Knicks side of things, the biggest problem we saw with the Knicks was just having two guys who are not good defenders on the court at the same time, especially against very versatile teams, the top dogs in the league in Cleveland, Boston, and OKC. Every time that they matched up against the Knicks had no answer defensively, and when their offense would really slow down, it would turn into the Jalen Brunson show, which we even saw kind of come back to bite them in the playoffs, and eventually they would get a bad quality shot and they would suck at getting back on defense, which really also came back to bite them in a series like the Indiana Pacers, and you know those dudes have the runs. You know those dudes love to run. And while the Knicks also face the issue of, because of getting rid of Donte DiVincenzo in the deal, they lost one more guy that they could rotate in and out of the game. So realistically, they only had 6 super playable guys in the playoffs. They were throwing out DeLon Wright. Landry Shamet playoff minutes were a little questionable as well. The principle of them taking so long to really figure out their bench, you should not be playing these guys that you are uncertain of when it's a last resort. court. As for Minnesota, well, we can see that the deal turned out similar to how we expected. Julius Randle obviously being able to provide a little bit of creation and having some very, very good playoff games. What really came back to bite the Wolves was their horrific three-point shooting in the playoffs. Guess who's the one guy who would have solved that in that scenario? Karl-Anthony Towns. Part of what killed the Knicks was their defensive versatility with Karl-Anthony Towns not being able to do much on the perimeter or especially guard a pick and roll. I might have felt more comfortable if Julius Randle was there, so I just see the irony in the whole thing. The flaws come out of the guys that they just traded away. Giving up Cat means you are giving up so much spacing that if Randle does not have a good game, you have to find where that three-point shooting is coming from, versus Cat being one of the most consistent three-point shooting big men that we've really seen. We also saw that at times the decision making of a guy like Julius Randle would really harm them, and especially in the Thunder series, he also would not work a lot to get open off the ball, and the Thunder were just denying him. Now, luckily for the Timberwolves, though, they still made it just back exactly where they were last year, but I would say that the teams that they went through last year actually proved to be a little tougher. So realistically, it is hard to gauge whether this season was a success or not for the Timberwolves. And Julius Randle's contract is actually up now. Here's the real kicker. The Timberwolves have to worry about the money of Naz Reid, whose contract is up, as well as Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who were two very big pieces throughout this playoff run. With a guy like Naz Reid, obviously, if they did get rid of him, that would really hurt their depth at the big man position. The Timberwolves do have very many good young pieces off their bench, though. I really like Terrence Shannon Jr. at Illinois. He was incredible, and in the playoffs, he was one of their most reliable energy guys off the bench, especially in that Thunder series. He got them fired up very many times, and we're still waiting on if Rob Dillingham is going to end up getting playing time. So I do think going into this offseason that the Timberwolves do have a lot of decisions to make, and especially looking at what Julius Randle was able to do in this playoffs. Despite his not so great OKC series, he was able to really flourish in those first two rounds, so that is something they really have to look at. Donte DiVincenzo was very up and down shooting from three in this playoff run, shooting just under 32% from three, but against OKC, he finally hit his stride, shooting nearly 44%. It also kind of raises the question of, is it worth still paying Rudy Gobert $35 million? His value is obviously on the defensive side of the ball, but offensively, he is a complete non-factor. His hands are made of Play-Doh, and he cannot catch a basketball. That's another decision they'd have to make, as Naz Reid would fill the gap offensively, but obviously Naz Reid is nowhere near the defender that Rudy Gobert is. Oh my god. Now, the scary thing for the New York Knicks coming up is Karl-Anthony Towns, OG, Jalen Brunson, Mikal, and Josh Hart all being such highly paid players. Just between the five of them, they're combined making $172 million. Precious Achiuwa, Cam Payne, DeLon Wright, and Landry Shamet will all be free agents this season. I really like what Mitchell Robinson brings to this team, and especially the value he brings. His impact was shown so much throughout every series that the Knicks played in, just him getting better and better throughout the playoffs. Nobody expected him to have as big of an impact as he did, but it showed that when Karl-Anthony Towns was out there, they needed also a guy that could rebound and play a lot more solid defense and kind of lock down the paint. But the Knicks' biggest struggle, in my opinion, was Josh Hart. His offense was just a non-factor. He was not aggressive, not looking to score. There were times he would get disrespected and left open from three, and he wouldn't even feel an urge to take the shot, and I thought that was just downright ridiculous. And luckily, you have Jalen Brunson on a very team-friendly deal, but next year, he will be making $10 million more than he made this year. Well, the Knicks fall into the problem that they don't have the money to go sign quality free agents, some of these quality role players that they need to fill out their bench, unless they were trying to make a trade, which they would probably have to give up Mitchell Robinson and or Josh Hart to try to get someone. That also, you'd be hurting your depth as well, which the Knicks don't have much depth to begin with. But I think the biggest thing that we could take away for the Knicks from this Pacers series was just that they were not able to keep up on the defensive side of the ball. And for a team, again, that doesn't have a lot of depth, you need a lot more offensive production out of some of these guys that are supposed to be your two-way guys. And again, I think the person I was personally most disappointed in was Josh Hart. He only averaged 8 points a game against the Pacers, and they are a team that you have to have an offense to keep up with their firepower, no matter how much you're able to try to lock them down. And I do think it is a little unfair, though, to grade the Knicks season as a failure. I personally see it as a success. They took out Boston, which, again, as I mentioned earlier, their roster construction was very similarly built to try to stop Boston by having those two defensive versatile wings. They made it to the conference finals, and they gave Indiana a competitive series. If they would have found a way to close out that first game, things could have been different. Unfortunately, they choked away the first game in one of the most crazy fashions that I've ever seen, but I can't really say anything because the same thing just happened to the Thunder in game 1 of the finals. So you know what, fair play. The Pacers found a way to really abuse the kind of immobile defense of Karl-Anthony Towns at times, and also they were able to kind of throw some good defensive coverage at him when he would try to drive in, or even if he would get a post touch with that small guy on him. That's when they would double and collapse on him. I think the best thing going forward for the Knicks is that you still have Jalen Brunson, but for salary cap purposes, Jalen Brunson's deal is incredible, and I think that's the one positive you have looking forward. I still really like OG on this team. I completely forgot to mention up until this point, Tom Thibodeau is gone, but they could also look for candidates like Michael Malone from the Nuggets or even Taylor Jenkins from the Grizzlies. I personally think Mike Malone would be very cool to see in New York, but also I don't think Tibbs is really that much at fault because, again, he got criticized for not playing his bench, and then when he does it, it's also criticized. Part of that was he should have played them a little more throughout the regular season, but regardless, their bench was probably one of the worst in the league. I don't think that he's really at fault for that. If anything, you can blame the actual roster construction. Some of the lineups were very questionable at times. Having Landry Shamet out there with DeLon Wright and Miles McBride all at once is kind of nasty for a conference finals game. I think going forward, though, the Knicks have kind of figured out, once they get this new coach in play, they need to really just figure out defense. I think if they can do that, they will be sound. Offensively, I think some more plays to draw up for Karl-Anthony Towns to use him, but it does look like if they figured out the defensive part of their game, and especially if they fill in with a couple pieces, they just need to figure out that paint defense, maybe how to work around that double big. We saw it work with Cat and Gobert at times, so obviously we might be able to see that with Cat and Robinson playing next to each other. And I feel like, if anything, the Timberwolves actually have more of a direction because we saw such positive things from Randle outside of the Oklahoma City series. Their biggest question marks are just going to be Naz Reid, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and then obviously if they want to keep Rudy Gobert, as he's still there for a few more seasons. And I think so far this has appeared to be a win-win trade. I am very impressed with how the Knicks went through this postseason. I did not expect them to get past Boston at all. They also were 2 games away from the finals, and we're back in the conference finals for the first time since 2000. So that automatically is a success right there. I'm happy with the Timberwolves getting back to the conference finals. Anthony Edwards is still very young. He has so much time to develop. He's going to be incredible. Just keep giving him time to keep working. Obviously, you need to figure out that supporting cast around him if you want Anthony Edwards to stay your franchise cornerstone. I think this trade really opened the eyes of a lot of people, seeing that when you make a move like this and move one of your best players on your roster, things aren't always going to go smoothly in the first year. But for both these teams, it seemed like it actually got figured out after about a month or 2 into the season. Just obviously both teams do still have some very glaring issues, and I'm hoping going forward they'll actually be able to figure that part out, because both of these teams could be very competitive. And honestly, once they got to the conference finals, we could have even seen a Knicks Timberwolves finals series. Obviously things would have had to go a lot differently in both of their series, but we were actually a lot closer than people would have expected. Make sure to drop a like and subscribe if you did not already, though. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video, and as always, Thunder up, and see you next time, Cub.